If we don't understand what feels good about something, we're going to always miss out with our kids about the things that draw them to that thing. And if we don't understand what's going to draw them to AI emotionally, and a lot will, then they're going to have to keep that entire part of their life separate from us. And we won't hear about it.
Dr. Becky, I am so excited to be here with you. And I have to just confess, and I said this to you before, but I have to confess, I was leaving the house. My child has had a stomach bug. He was just at the doctor yesterday for a finger infection, and he just got his first sunburn. And I was leaving the house, and my husband was like, should we call social services on ourselves? Are we doing okay? And I was like, do not say this. I am going to interview Dr. Becky. That's a bad omen. And so, here we are.
But say what I said to you about those moments.
It sounds so much better coming from you. You say it.
That I would say to your husband, no, we are building resilience. That resilience is built in hard moments with support. Not rescuing, but, oh, that sunburn hurts. Oh, your belly hurts. You need the hard moment and you need the support. That doesn't mean we should give our kid hard moments. That's not what I'm saying. But the hard moments naturally arise because we're imperfect people raising imperfect people. And the hard moments arise and we actually don't want to take them away. We just want to let our kids know they can get through that. And so sounds like that's what you're doing.
I love that. John, did you hear?
John, that was for you.
Yep, love that. Okay, now that that's out of the way. My background is covering technology. I've covered it for almost 15 years, which in tech years just makes me feel very ancient. But the human impact of tech and your background is just, you are this force in the parenting community. And what's so interesting is 5 years ago, you didn't even have an Instagram account. You're a practicing psychologist here in New York City, helping counsel families behind closed doors. Technology has some degree just opened you up to the world and gifted us all so many of these insights that I think make so many parents feel less alone. I'm curious, how do you feel at this point about becoming an online figure, especially representing something that's just so incredibly powerful?
Yeah. I've never been asked that question. How do I feel about that part? I guess in some ways I feel conflicted. What I don't feel at all conflicted about and what I feel so grateful for is I feel like I get to wake up every day and think about topics and come up with new ideas and hear people's stories and connect with families in ways that just light me up inside. To actually say you spend a lot of your waking hours doing the things that light you up. I'm only grateful for that part. The part that I guess I feel a little more conflicted about is, the thing that keeps us all human and the thing that really matters for our mental health, for our groundedness, up until this point, at least for the evolution of our species, is the way we connect with one another. Human connection is the essence of attachment. Attachment is such an evolutionary force. We kind of need other people and we need to be understood by other people. And we also need friction with other people. It's through those moments of friction in relationships. Oh, you didn't get me. I wanted to tell you a story and you're not really listening. And I want to tell you about my day and you want to tell me about your day and how are we going to manage that? And you tried to fix a situation when I just wanted you to listen. It's actually all those moments of friction that give us identity and purpose and resilience. And so when I think about my online persona, the only part of it I guess I feel conflicted about is wanting to continue to show up in a way that's never too polished, that never has me pretending to be someone I'm not. That's why I try to say all the time, all this Dr. Becky stuff, I don't do myself. And I really don't. And I don't even feel guilty about that. I'm a parent. I'm trying to do my best every day and I'm messing up every other moment too. And so I think there's something that happens when people go online, that there's this veneer, there's this pedestal. And that actually takes away from the humanness. And so that part I just try to, really steer clear from.
I think it's so interesting what you say about this idea of friction. And I want to get into that actually through the lens of artificial intelligence. I spend so much time kind of in the AI space, in weird Reddit threads and talking, in corners of the internet. But before I get into it, I'd love to talk just a little bit about the community that you've built with Good Inside, because it's not just Dr. Becky. It's Dr. Becky and community of parents who, through this platform, are sharing what's top of mind, sharing fears and worries. When we look at this through the lens of technology, you almost kind of have this like magic wand where you kind of know what's top of mind for your community. So what do you see most from parents and children when it comes to their concerns about technology? What are they saying?
Oh, yeah. A couple things when it comes to technology. I think number one, we're hesitant to see, or it's just hard to see how kind of large of a role technology plays in our family's life and in our family struggle. So on the surface, let's say, oh, my kid never listens. My kid never listens. We're always late and they don't listen to take a shower and they don't listen for homework and they don't, right? And it's so easy to just stay at that level of, okay, well, why aren't they listening? Why aren't they listening? But what you might be missing is something at the system level. That's always the level, I think, not just about a tip up here. It's actually about a system and kind of resetting the emotional infrastructure down here. I'll give an example of screens. And again, this is not about blame. It's just about understanding the system. Well, if this 9-year-old gets home from school, is on their iPad all the time, okay? And again, there's probably good reasons for that, even technology there. Well, my kid is getting used to coming home and having a ton of dopamine with not a lot of effort. So kind of effortless dopamine is how I think about it. I just can sit here, the excitement comes to me, the wins come to me. By the time you're asking that kid to do homework, are you joking me? That's like me having, 30 ice cream sundaes and my husband asking me to have dinner. Like, I'm not doing dinner now. Like, do you know what I've just done? And so I think one of the first things we see in the community is actually this tendency to just look at the struggles we're having with our kids and not think about the structure that's actually underneath and how big of a role tech is playing in a structure that's not really setting our kid up for success. And then I think the other thing that comes up all the time is just how unwinnable this feels to parents. It's so unfair that kids have access to so much technology that everyone kind of knows isn't good for them, but it's kind of left to parents to regulate individually, which really feels like kind of an unfair system.
And I think so many parents feel like, and this is coming from me having like looked at technology for the last 15 years, being like, oh, can I even prepare myself or prepare my child to grow up in this world that looks so different than the world that I grew up in? I think that there is a feeling of anxiety and a lack of preparation. So what do you say to parents who say, I'm finally wrapping my head around social media and now we have AI and AI companions and all of these new things. Like, what's your advice for parents who are looking at it through that lens?
So number one, my response is just compassion. Like, yes, the technology is moving at such a fast pace and we are being asked to try to manage something for our kids that we don't fully understand ourselves. So my first response is right there with you. This is really hard. Number two, I actually think it's our curiosity that's one of our best parental kind of traits and assets. And you actually can't be curious about something you fully understand. So actually not knowing something, being confused by something, being willing to say, I don't actually have all the answers. Those are necessary conditions to be curious, right? Because, if I understood everything about your job and you asked me to ask you a question, I'd say like, I'm sorry, I don't have any questions. I kind of understand the whole thing. If I don't understand it, I can ask a million questions, which is actually a beautiful thing. And so for the parent listening who's thinking, I don't even understand AI fully myself, but I know it's kind of coming into play with my kids' homework or they're going to it for emotional support, just to say to yourself, not understanding everything is actually going to work more in my favor. Because now I can ask questions that are really questions and we can figure this out together instead of asking questions that are actually just judgment with a question mark at the end, which never plays well with children. Right. And then number three, I think, and this came up for me as soon as you started asking the question, when in doubt, coming back to the same kind of jobs in my mind, in my language, we always have as a parent is always going to be a useful framework when there's some world change or technology change. And so I always tell parents that we want to do our job well. Every parent, you're a parent, says, I want to do a good job as a parent. But if I said to you, what is your job? Like, what are the things that make up your job? Most parents say, I don't know.
Definitely keeping my kid alive.
Definitely keeping your kid alive. That's
number one.
Number one.
Making sure God, now I feel like, why did I just bring this on myself to try to do this in front of you?
No, I can answer. This is no pop quiz.
Good. Okay.
There's no pop quiz. So to me, there's two things that we would say a good inside, we call these family jobs to come back to, which is setting boundaries and then kind of understanding what's happening for your kid through connection, validation. So let's say boundaries and understanding. So I'll start with boundaries. over and over as a parent, I set boundaries. It doesn't matter what the technology is. Setting boundaries is always going to be something I do to help keep my kids safe. Boundaries are limits we set. Boundaries are rules we make that tend to have a sense of what's good for someone long-term, maybe not just optimizing for, short-term.
Yeah.
Bedtime is a boundary we set. The food they eat is a boundary we set. When they get over sleepovers or how many after-school activities, technology. So I just think that's a powerful framework. No matter what is going on with AI, I'm probably going to have to set some boundaries, right?
Sure.
Okay. And then when you set a boundary with a kid, especially if they're not used to it, they always have the same reaction. And this is so important because we have such fantasies about what's going to happen. Like, I think people think I say to my kids, screen time is over. And they go, okay.
Well, like you're Dr. Becky.
Yeah,
of course we envision that's what happens.
Right. Or they say, like, I really appreciate you protecting my long-term interests because I'm not able to do that. You're such a sturdy leader. No. Boundaries are always followed with your kids' protest. Yeah. Always. And we somehow keep letting ourselves be surprised by this. But if they're going to be followed with protest and you're someone who likes to do your job well, it's actually good news because you might think, oh, then I can do the other part of my job. So my kid's going to be upset, let's say about the end of screen time, but then I can do the understanding piece. Oh, you wish you could watch another show. You wish you could stay up later. You wish is almost, especially when your kids are young, good language just to start using, right? You wish you could have ice cream for breakfast.
Right.
Whatever it is, right? But when you understand your kid, you still hold the boundary. Understanding doesn't mean you change the boundary. Right. And the reason I come back to these jobs is if I'm starting to think about AI, I would start to think, what are the boundaries around it? And sometimes boundaries aren't just things we say. They're actually things we do. What does my kid have access to for their computer? How often is my kid allowed to be on technology in their own room, if at all? Is my kid allowed to have an iPad in their room? What's on their iPad? Right. Is their iPad set up as a child or as an adult? Most of us think our kids' iPads are set up with our kids as a kid so we can control. A lot of kids, if we didn't do it for them, have worked their way around it and they're set up as an adult. That's something I'd want to change. That's a boundary. My kid's going to be upset and then I can understand. And so to me, those are jobs I can come back to even as I'm learning a new technology.
I love this idea of looking at AI through the lens of boundaries, right? I've always looked at it from, if I put on my tech hat, through the lens of like guardrails. But you're putting, but on the parenting side, it's like it's like one and the same.
Yeah.
This is a good time because we had people were obviously very excited that you were going to be on the show. And so we had some folks call in with some questions. So I'm going to play one of them now because I think this is a woman who has a question about ChatGPT and her child. And I feel like now's the perfect time to play the tape.
Great.
Hi. So my daughter, who is 12, decided to use ChatGPT to ask a question about test taking and studying tips. And she was telling me about this casually one day while we were folding laundry. And she said that she got some great test taking tips, but then ChatGPT started to prompt her about her feelings and give feelings advice. And so we paused the conversation and we talked about the different ways that we could use ChatGPT and other AI or technology to help us source information, synthesize information, but that we should be particularly wary of and careful about any type of AI tool that is trying to ask questions about feelings or give advice about feelings. We talked a bit about other young people who've used AI tools that have led them down paths to suicide or other harmful behavior. And I think she's super smart and gets all of this. But I was wondering, what more can I do as a parent? What more can parents do as our tweens begin engaging with AI and technology in school and in other settings, and how we can prepare them to discern what is a good use, what's a not so good use, and when to be really skeptical of the types of information that an AI tool is providing to them.
This is a fantastic question. I mean, it really is. So I'm going to say the thing that's loudest on my mind, and then I'll expand on it. I think probably the most important thing to do with your kid around AI, and this is a great question, when is it being used in a way that feels like it's helping me practically getting information? And when am I starting to rely on it for kind of emotional support in a way that might work against me long term than for me? To me, the most important thing you can do as a parent is keep the conversation open. I would actually say this with any tricky topic with our kid. And the reason I think that's so important is it's actually going against what feels really natural in the moment. It's not that we want to end a conversation, but we want to say things like, so do this and not this, right? We want to give lessons, right? Anytime we give a final lesson, this is the right way to do it. What happens for my kid is they're thinking, okay, so if I ever go to do it in a way that's against this rule, my parents is going to be upset with me, right? I don't really know who I could go talk to. If I know one thing about tweens and teens growing up in an AI age, they're going to have a lot of tricky situations, a lot of messy situations. I said to my kid recently, my 14-year-old, if you were walking to a town and you wanted to get there and all of a sudden there's a shortcut, would you take it? He was like, yeah, is this a trick question? I was like, yeah, I would too. Good. Okay. You're growing up at a time when there is this shortcut for every academic and emotional thing you will ever go through. That is so hard because this shortcut isn't like the shortcut to the town. It is a shortcut, but the way it will add up over time is things we've talked about. It's going to be harder to think about things yourself. It's going to be harder to tolerate people not getting it right. It's going to, over time, maybe take away from the things you're trying to build to function in the world, but it is a shortcut. I'm not going to pretend it's not. And so what a hard thing. And so if we use that as a baseline, not my kid is lazy, not my kid is lying, but oh my goodness, to be a teen growing up with such a readily available academic and emotional shortcut that we say isn't good for them, but is a shortcut with an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. I think the best thing I could do as a parent is just continue to be a home base for my kid to come to because they are going to need it. I think the cost to not being emotionally connected to your kid has just never been higher because our kids are just going to face endlessly more tricky situations because of all the technology. Now, that doesn't mean, quote, approval or throwing a party. I'm not saying you should say to your kid, if you ever use ChatGPT to cheat on your paper, let's go out to ice cream. No, okay? And the reason I think that's funny is we tend to think in extremes, right? Either I'm saying, you can't do that, or I'm throwing them a party. What's in the middle is keeping a conversation open. So I'll just model that because I think modeling is sometimes, the best way to get it across based on what this parent was saying. Wow, so you use ChatGPT to help you get some study skills. Is that right? Right? Did I get that right? That's just such a powerful thing to say to a kid. Did I get that right? Right? Or to your husband or your wife, whoever it is.
I'm literally just taking mental notes. I'm like, thank God this is taped. Yeah. Note to Laurie, keep this, okay?
So actually, I'm going to start again. The number one thing I would say to your kid to start with when they talk to you about anything related to AI is start by saying, I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. Because there's something much more meta you're communicating to your kid in that moment, which is these types of messy topics are things that can kind of be held in our relationship. That's so powerful. I'm so glad you're talking to me about this. Then just mirror back what they say. So let me see if I got this right. You were talking to ChatGPT, you got some study skill tips, and that was really helpful. Did I get that right? Your kid's like, yeah. And then something different happened. It kind of veered off into a conversation maybe about how you're feeling. Is that right? Yes. And this is probably what I'd say to my kid. What was that like? And if I have a kind of people-pleasing kid, they'll probably say, oh, it was bad. I know that's wrong. And this is where I think if we want to play the long game, I'd probably say, look, maybe this sounds weird, but did any part of it kind of feel good? It can feel good when someone just says back to you what they see happening emotionally. Yeah. Because if we don't understand what feels good about something, we're going to always miss out with our kids about the things that draw them to that thing. And if we don't understand what's going to draw them to AI emotionally, and a lot will, then they're going to have to keep that entire part of their life separate from us, and we won't hear about it. And the way I would just keep that conversation open versus closed is if I was going to close the conversation, and it would feel better to a parent because it feels final. You'd say, I'm glad we talked about this. So don't go to ChatGPT for emotional stuff. Do go to logical stuff, right? Right. And I tell myself, I feel really good as a parent. Yeah. I just think life is a lot messier than that. I just don't think at age 12 now, from 12 through whenever, every time my kid's going through something emotionally, they're going to think, I remember that talk I had with my parent. They said, yes, this, no, this. So that's what I'm going to do. That's not how our emotions work. I'd rather leave a conversation open like this. Again, I'm so glad you told me that. Look, there's probably going to be a moment when something feels emotionally hard, emotionally messy, and maybe you might think about coming to me, but there might be something enticing about just talking to a computer who probably is always available, never has their own agenda, never gets upset, and always says something that's like, oh, that feels good. And I just want to tell you, when that moment comes, when that feels interesting or enticing, that's actually a moment I'd love you to tell me about. I anticipate the moment's going to come. Maybe it already has.
Yeah.
I'm not kind of ignorant to that fact. And so what I'm really doing is, in some ways, I'm opening the door for more conversations instead of kind of closing all those future doors.
Yeah. God, it's so powerful to hear you talk about it, because I look at how the AI is developed, right, which you touched on, which is in many ways it's affirmative, it's always on, it always has an answer. It will go in the direction that you want it to go in. These systems are so incredibly powerful. This is social media on steroids.
Beyond.
And I think to hear you say, okay, well, we need to actually do the thing that's human to counter the thing that's technology.
Yes.
Is actually really powerful. And then I want to go back to something you said about the mess.
Yeah.
It is hard to be human. Being human is weird. Like to be vulnerable is really tough. Intimacy is, as like, I think you've said this before, intimacy is like awkward.
Yes.
Right? Like humanity is messy, but it's the mess that makes us find purpose. I think back to when I was 11 or 12, which were kind of painful years for me, to be quite, I mean, for many, right? So I'm no special flower here.
I'm not
impressed.
But
I think about it growing up a kid in Georgia, the only Jewish girl at a very Christian conservative school, parents having a really nasty divorce. And I think about AI, right? And I used to write my feelings in a journal. I had journals and journals full of how I was feeling. And I always try to say this, like, to parents who are trying to understand AI and companionship, and why would people be talking to these? Imagine if the journal talked back. Imagine if it was always on and always there. Imagine if the journal played the role of the boyfriend I couldn't get, or the therapist I didn't have access to at the time, or the parent, or emulated a parent figure to me. Would that have been helpful? Or would that have taken me further from my reality of feeling this isolation? Because I think that isolation probably, and that feeling and that tension probably made me who I am and why I'm sitting here with you, right?
Yeah.
And had a certain empathy and understanding for people. So as we look at a future with AI, what happens when our children aren't going to be growing up experiencing the mess of what it means to be human when it comes to kind of AI and that loss of friction?
I mean, I think this is in some ways Good Inside's new raison d'etre, reason to exist. I mean, it's terrifying. It's the thing that kind of keeps me up at night. I mean, we are all drawn to convenience in the short term over what's good to us in the long term. We can't help it as humans. We love the comfort of it. It's so comfortable. Our bodies are drawn to that. Yeah. And AI now is in a place, I don't even know where it's going to be years from now, where again, what's there is immediate comfort, and it's really sophisticated comfort. It's not just a lolly. It's not lollipop anymore, right? And so, what I think the nuance is so I experienced something messy as a human, and if I can bring it to a container that is sycophantic, that just mirrors it all back to me, right? Always available, never tired, never reacts, my inkling, if I'm honest, is let's say the first 2 times, making that up number, but that feels nice. Okay, right? I wonder if you could have used your journal to talk back to you a handful of times, if that would have felt really grounding. I hear you, Laurie. You're right. This feels hard because it is hard. You're not crazy. You're going to get through it. I'm making that up, right? There could be something. Then I think it's about not just diminishing returns, but where the trajectory really changes. One of the things I'm always thinking about with kids and why I care so much about the work we're doing at Good Inside is the early years become the factory settings for all of our teenage and adult years. The early years matter so much because it forms the circuitry on our body. What should I expect in the world? How do things work? What do I expect of myself? What do I expect of interactions? What can I expect of other people? What happens when I'm upset? Who do I go to? What happens then? How quickly do I go from 100 to a 0? When I'm upset, what is my expectation of the other person or the other entity? Do they listen right away? Do I sometimes have to wait? Right? This is actually what's happening. And now fast forward to adulthood, there's two parts of the road I think that I'm concerned about. One is, will we just be so intolerant of human relationships that we proverbially keep ourselves at home, right? What? Go talk to someone, right? You're right. Human interactions are awkward. You can't make the awkward unawkward. Asking someone out on a date, talking to someone about something that's hard for you. These are hard moments. And the only way they start to become easier is you just do them a lot. It's pure reps and practice. So one part of me thinks, what's going to be our literal ability? If all of our early circuitry says when something's hard, it gets easy right away. When something's hard, someone's always there right away. When you start talking immediately, it says something back and it's perfect and it's not reactive and it's never triggered and it never asks you to consider another viewpoint, right? Well, how am I going to go talk to a friend or a boyfriend, right? So just, am I going to be unable? The other thing scares me maybe even more, and I already see this, where if I'm accustomed as a kid, especially, to people fixing my problems for me, rescuing me from my disappointment, when someone doesn't, forget being awkward, Laurie, it's a little like, why are you making me feel this disappointment? Right. Why are you making me feel this way? Who is responsible for this frustration? Because I am very accustomed to having frustration, and my AI companion just taking it down from 100 to a 0. So now when I even feel frustration at a 1, it feels like an 1,000 because my body has no coping skill, and that leads to a lot of rage.
I think I think what you're saying is you're touching on something that if I could kind of put on my tech human lens of saying, oh, guys, we got to look around the corner. I can't stop thinking about AI companions and young men.
100%.
And a new generation of young men that haven't had to go through the friction of having the crush on the girl, getting rejected. And we're in a different age than social media where, okay, we've now seen the outcome of us being in these filter bubbles and having algorithms push us towards people like us. We have a harder time having a conversation now with each other, right? And people who have differing viewpoints. Now with artificial intelligence, this is an even more powerful tool that has a capacity for exactly what you just described. And I would love, there aren't many studies that have come out on AI companionship and young men, but there's one that actually hasn't been published yet, but a friend of mine, she's a computational social scientist who studies human behavior and digital footprint. She also happens to be a new mom as well. So we talk AI data and little humans too. And she actually, I asked her to send a little voice note about a study that's coming out and emerging, and it is so spot on to what you're talking about. So I'd love to just play that and get your response.
So the science of AI companionship is still in its infancy, I would say, but there are already some interesting patterns that we're seeing. So for example, there's more and more evidence that, at least in the short term, using AI companions can actually be quite beneficial for psychological well-being and loneliness. But what's interesting here is that the long-term impact could be more negative, especially when you look beyond the individual who's actually using the AI companion. There's this recent study by Michaela Rodriguez at the University of Michigan, for instance, where they got young men to use an AI companion for 7 weeks. And what they found is that these young men actually felt better after those 7 weeks, but they also became more sexist and aggressive, which, isn't entirely surprising when you consider that these AI companions are often intentionally designed to be somewhat submissive and to provide this unconditional validation. So the challenge that I think we're potentially facing here is that our expectations for what human-to-human relationships should look like might shift over time. And that's really the dynamic that we need to understand better. Is it that AI companions help us feel less lonely and more connected in the short term, but then they actually prevent us from having more meaningful real-world relationships, which could obviously make us even more lonely and miserable in the long run?
So my first reaction to that is I don't think the AI companions at the core change the expectation of human-to-human relationships. They inherently change our tolerance for the reality, the emotional reality of human-to-human relationships. And so the short-term data that people feel better is, it could be a tricky thing. You know, nobody says I want someone to feel worse, but a lot of things, most things that make us feel the most better in the short term are the least good for us in the long term. And I'll tell you what's coming to mind, because I'll never forget this session I had with this, I don't know, he's probably like a 35-year-old guy. He started seeing me. He was totally sober, but he had a long history of drugs, heroin, and it was very hard for him to tolerate distress in his life, especially relational distress, but really committed to, a sober life. And I remember just saying to him, therapy's going to help you. I just want to be honest. It's going to help you and I'll learn a lot. What I teach you will never be as good as heroin. I just want to say that to you. It's never. Like what I have in this room is not heroin-like. Like heroin, from what I know of it, even though I'm not a user, will take you from whatever you're feeling high, distress, to totally numbing that out. It is gone in a second. What I'm going to teach you is when you feel upset, something that feels like a 10, it's not going to a 0. It'll go to a 9 3/4, 9.5. The best it's going to get in that whole first day is an 8. I'm just going to tell you what I have to sell. Now, the good parts are you're not going to have all the negative stuff that was associated, right? And we kind of laughed about it. But if we were looking at what made him feel better, we would say heroin all day long. Now, we know that that's not a good long-term solution. And I think we're talking about the same thing. So I think when we're even looking at metrics, like how someone feels better is a really important part of a study, not just the level to which they feel better. Something that can make you feel from so bad to so good. The faster it does that, the worse it is for you long term.
And that is what we're beginning to see with artificial intelligence in a nutshell. It's so funny because it's exactly what you explained before. Yeah, she said that these are the early results are showing this. I worry about young men, and I worry a lot about children and artificial intelligence, and I want to get into it before we end about kind of the positives, because I think there's going to be some really interesting places. One, I love this idea of being able to have you here and just like play stuff for you, because
let's do it.
I feel like I sometimes go into these dark corners of the web, and so I would love to talk a little bit about deepfakes and bullying with you, because parents all the time are like, well, you say there are all these threats coming. What do we do? And so now I'm like, okay, Dr. Becky's with us. So now I can say, here's what we can do. This is a type of threat that's coming into schools. And so I was wondering, I know that at Good Inside, you have these scripts for all these scenarios that we face as parents and how to talk to, how parents can talk about them. So I'd love to kind of like live collab on a script for these emerging harms when it comes to AI and our children. So I'm going to give you a scenario. A mom in Florida receives a panic call from her 8th grade daughter during the school day. She says, I need you to come pick me up right now. I saw a picture of me naked, but it's not really me, Mom. She then goes on to learn that 2 boys at her daughter's middle school had exchanged new deepfake photos they made on an app of more than 15 classmates and teachers. The image might not be real, but that impact surely feels real. So I'm going to play the sound. This is from her mother.
It was my daughter's face on this body with the same skin color tone that I got nauseous and I started crying because my kid had to see it first alone. And the mentality of some people that, oh, well, it's fake. Well, the technology is so precise that the skin color and the skin tone matched 99.9%. At the time, she was 13, and we all know that, that's a really delicate age. We've all been through puberty. I would say 90% of us agree it sucks. There's the influences, then you're a girl, like how do you look? And, then there's the boys and the hormones. And so this was just like next level psychological abuse, because it wasn't physical, right? And it wasn't verbal. It was an image, right, that she had to look at. But man, it does really affect the victim and their families.
Oh, my heart's racing and breaking at the same time. It's horrible. Before I launch into like how I would respond, I just always want to caveat, like I'm here in a studio with you. Like if this, any of us in these moments, like none of us are doing any of this quote perfectly, but I'll try to respond just from like a framework. I think the first thing I'd want to say to my daughter is I will be right there. Like you go pick your daughter up from that school immediately. Again, I'm going back to like, I'm so glad she called her mom. That says a lot about the relationship. When hard things happen, I can go toward, not away. And I would just have her in the car and I would like drive just far enough that like no one else can see you. Maybe it's the side of the road, somewhere in private, and park the car and just saying, I am so glad you called me. I'm here for you. We're going to get through this together. And then like, shut your mouth. Shut your mouth. I actually think like that's probably my number one script for parents these days is stop talking. Stop talking. And because I'm a visual person, like when your kid's going through anything hard, they're kind of like this egg without a shell. I find that like this very evocative image. That's how they feel. They're spread out all over. And what they need you to be is like shell energy, but more than that, like a container. And that's often what we are for our kids. We are their container so they can have the feelings and the awful experience. There's no advice. Like what advice am I giving to my kid right now? Like it's all going to be empty. And right now my kid is just probably hollowed out. They're this egg without a shell. What's the crack in the shell? Like they were just completely violated. The way they thought the world works was just violated in front of them. Person's like, that's not even me, by the way. And now it's all over and people think it's me. And it's just such a violation of expectations that your kid's going to have, really big reaction and feelings. And this is not logical. It's not illogical. People always say that. Emotions, just because emotions aren't logical, that doesn't mean they're illogical. Like Mandarin is not ill English. It's just not English. They're two different systems. And when your kid is in a big emotional state, that's what you are. You are a container. So your words serve to establish that container. I'm so glad you called. I am right here. We are going to get through this together. That's kind of like, I am that edge. And then I'm just going to let my kid freaking collapse into me and say all the things and get it all out. And I'm going to hug her and I'm going to be there. I'm going to stop myself from saying, I'm calling the school right away. Maybe I am later, but right now my kid needs me to just really be with her.
It's so interesting because all of these scenarios that I say to you, you have the most human advice for. And it's like, me as like a technology person, I'm like, oh yeah, like people need to know the images aren't real, but the impact is real. And oh, by the way, when it comes to artificial intelligence, they mirror you. And I almost want to explain this from a product standpoint to help validate the child's feelings. And what I love is that I am totally 100% wrong here. And hearing you talk about it, you're like, you deal with these new tech threats with the most important thing, which is the container that makes us human.
Yeah. And look, I think that, and I just have to say this because it's coming up more and more. You're like, I'm just going to say it head on. Dr. Becky, do you ever worry that all this parenting advice makes people just more anxious? This is like my favorite question and my number one pet peeve. Having a manager at work is helpful. Having 50 managers at work would be very overwhelming. We live in a world of 50 million parenting advice managers, right? And I think the thing I just want to establish about what I do and what we do at Good Inside, and it is so important to make sure people know this, it's not advice. It's not tips. It's actually the same foundations. There's like 9 foundations we teach people how to apply it to a million things. So when I hear deepfakes, honestly, it's this might sound weird. It's no different than when your kid doesn't make the soccer team. I'm not saying the situation's no different, but actually, if we're always trying to learn a new system when every parenting situation changes, we are just adding our chaos to our kids. Like no one does that at work. When you're in a job and you're senior, you're like, hold on, well, let me come back to what I know. How do I tend to work through projects? You're not learning on the job every hour. And so the reason I think it sounds human is actually what we're saying, at least in the moment, has nothing to do with deep fakes. It has to do with something violating happening. My kid didn't think this was going to happen. It was a huge surprise. It's awful. It's exposing when you don't want to. That's actually probably in your body a more extreme version of what happens when a kid thinks they're getting the lead in the play at age 5 and they go to the list and their name's not there. And if we can see it through that lens, you're right. Not only is it human, but it actually feels a little easier. You're like, oh, I kind of did that when my kid was 5 for the play, and then when my kid was 8 for soccer, and I guess now I'm doing it with the deepfake thing. But kind of my approach is remarkably consistent.
I actually feel like it's the most comforting thing I've heard in a long time of looking through these threats, kind of these like cutting edge threats of AI companions and deepfakes. Like just this idea that like, oh, this thing we can apply is like really the scaffolding of what it
scaffolding.
means, and it's such a beautiful sentiment. I think a lot of parents would breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief. I know we have to end soon. I really want to get to some of the positives about artificial intelligence, because I think we're similar in that we both can look at the concerns around technology, but also you have Gigi, which is like an AI app modeled after you, right? And so much of the advice, because I genuinely believe AI can be so powerful.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play one last sound from a friend of mine about AI and parenting.
Great.
And so and we can hopefully end on a note of how we can actually see promise in this.
Hi, Dr. Becky. I am so excited that I get to ask you this question. I'm very grateful that my dear friend Laurie provided me with this opportunity. I admire the work that you do, and to be quite honest, my therapist and I reference you frequently when we are discussing motherhood and parenting. I know that there is a lot of scary stuff out there for children in regards to technology and AI, but my question comes from looking at the positive side of it. I am a stay-at-home mom, and being a good mother is one of the most important things in my life, so I'm always looking to grow in it. How do you see or suggest technology and AI as a tool to better myself as a mother to my child, and for that matter, as a family? That includes my husband, daughter, and myself, and obviously our dog too. Thank you so much. Love from Atlanta, from Jackie.
Look, I actually think this is similar to how we were talking about the other question with AI. When is it helpful? When are there diminishing returns? And when does something start to work more against you than for you? So AI is great. You have a quick question. What do I say when my kid gets off the bus and this thing happens, right? Whether you go to ChatGPT or Claude or you're in our app, like, and with our AI, you're gonna get a helpful answer. And that can be so grounding. You're kind of running around. You're like, wait, this thing just helped me have this moment when I felt like $1 million, right? To me, the image I think about a lot with parenting, and this to me is when it stops being helpful and starts being harmful, is we're living in this world now with like 1 million tips or 1 million ChatGPT answers. And I picture them all as flags. Flags don't get you far if you don't have a ground to put them in. You just have a lot of flags and you're like, I'm going to try this thing and my kid's not sleeping, so I'm going to say this thing and I'm going to do this thing. And you don't have a why. You don't actually understand if it helps, why it helped. Again, you don't have a way of saying, I know why this helped, and this is actually something I can repeat as my kid's life changes. And so I can become more and more dependent on an AI, which actually can lead me, not in one moment, but as a pattern of moments, not only to feel frantic, but to me, this is the worst part of parenting. I just feel like I've lost myself. We have all built up so much from an adaptive place in our childhood, but it's a lot of stuff in our adulthood that makes us doubt ourselves, that makes us think, oh, someone else knows better, right?
Yeah.
I actually think so much of parenthood is like finding the right guide to like kind of clear that out and return to yourself, where you're not just going to a chat all the time saying, what do I do when? We're able to kind of say in a moment, okay, I kind of understand what's going on. Right? Or if you are even going, it's to help you think through how to understand something, which is almost the opposite of just collecting hundreds of flags and not having a ground to plant them in. And so I guess my barometer and what we always talk about at Good Inside is, I'm just going to say this here. I've been talking about this term a lot, but I've never said it out loud to anyone else.
Now's the time.
Okay. It's called MVA, minimum viable advice. That's what we give people. Everyone needs a little bit of advice or information, but most of what's happening in a parenting situation that's hard isn't the moment. It's our fear about what the moment means. It's the way we take a moment and fast forward our kid's life 20 years and just that's actually what we're thinking about. And it's why a typical chat doesn't even make us feel better over time. Because we're not actually looking for the thing to do in the moment. We're actually scared of what it means. We're scared of the story we're telling ourselves about what it means. And we're scared about who our kid is going to be in 20 years. And someone just saying what to say when your kids get off the bus, we're like, okay, I did that, but why? Because that's not actually the core thing. So when I think about minimum viable advice, sure, we all need a little guidance here or there, but actually we need to better understand what is really happening. What are my frameworks? Like, what's actually going on for my kid? What am I actually worried about? How can I understand that? When we unpack that, that's what helps us feel more grounded and steadier. And I think the ultimate measure in parenting is saying, I can handle anything that comes my way. I'm not scared of the grocery store meltdown. I'm not scared of the lie. I'm not scared of the time my kid says, I'm not listening to anymore. I'm too big. I don't care. I don't have to. I know what those moments are about. That's the biggest flex, is not that everything is smooth and not that you always have the answer, but you're not actually scared of the thing around the corner. And none of that will come from a lot of tips. I actually think tip after tip after tip without a foundation probably gets us further away from that. And so to me, that's the way I would kind of use a barometer about whether something is helpful long term.
First of all, I love hearing how you talk about like MVA. You're speaking tech terms in my but in a parenting scaffolding, which I just love. You talked about like foundation. I know we have to end. I just want to say so much of launching this show, which is about tech and humans. I've spent my career interviewing folks in Silicon Valley, and I am so excited to launch this by talking to someone about humanity through the lens of tech. That's just always kind of been the goal. And I think our children and the world they grow up in with AI is going to be one of those important questions that we answer. And so my last question to you, I know it's personal to me. I've always just kind of wanted to make the world feel a little bit less alone. And I feel like I feel that from you as well. But why is this mission personal to you?
I mean, I guess at the end of the day, the world is just a collection of humans doing the best they can with the resources they have available, and as impacted by the health of the connections and relationships they have. And, I'm probably a short-term pessimist and long-term optimist, and think that as parents have more resources, as parents return to themselves, as we can show up for our kids in a way we're proud of more often and repair the other times, that's the only way that we can actually leave the next generation in a better place than ours. And nothing matters more than that.
Amazing. Great. Thank you so much.